If you've ever felt intimidated by a flower with a lot of creases and folds, then today's video is for you. The beautiful movement in this petunia drew me in, but what's surprising is how approachable this really becomes when we start to break it into simple shapes and layers. I'm going to walk you through my process today using wet on dry, and wet on damp techniques as we bring this flower to life. My name is Jessica and I'm thrilled to have you here. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I've gone ahead and traced my petunia onto a piece of Arches 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. This is about a 6x6, but I do include more sizes in the Etsy download. If you're gonna purchase that, you can follow along with me. And then in my palette here, I have some quinacridone magenta by Core, and then some phthalo blue, this is the green shade, by M. Graham. And then the mixtures that I have in here are just mixtures of these two together. And the purple in the middle, sometimes I'll throw a little hint of yellow if I want to dull things down. But for the most part, I'm going to just work with what I have in my palette. So mixtures here of these two colors. And I'm going to start out with the quinacridone magenta. I'm also going to be using a nice bright green, which you can use out of the tube or mix using Hansa Yellow Deep and Phthalo Blue. And if you want to tone it down, you can always add a touch of quinacridone magenta or rose. Oh, and for brushes, I have some 6s and 8s, both Simply Simmons and the Artegria round. So I'm going to start with the 8 Artegria round just to put some water into this whole top section here of our flower. Probably, you know what, I could probably even use a bigger brush if I wanted to. I'm just going to really quickly, loosely fill this in. And I'm actually going pretty wet because I want to make sure that I am nice and saturated. I've got a larger shape I'm going to work with at the beginning. And because it's a large shape, I want it to stay wet for myself here. And if I don't put enough water, it'll dry out pretty quick. So I'm just drowning it. I can always soak out the excess here in a minute. And I'm not being super precise when I come to the edges of these beautiful ruffled petals because I'm planning to just refine that with the brush and the paint when I get there. So just filling it in with water, and then if I see areas that are extra puddly, I can soak those out. And the Artegria are okay for that, but sometimes I do find I prefer using the Simply Simmons. They tend to soak water out a little better. They're a firmer brush. Doesn't really matter, but it does tend to help pull out excess. But I actually feel like this is soaking into my paper just nicely. I don't really feel like I am too wet. So let's just go ahead. Oh, and I do have my paper towel handy if I need it, but I'm going to go ahead and drop in some of our magenta here. So I've got a little bit of fresh here, but you can use dry paint as well and just reconstitute it a little bit. Start with this brush and see where it goes. Let's go ahead and just put, actually I did get a little bit of water. There was a couple of spots up here that are kind of more of a light purple. Maybe I'll come back and work on that section after. I'll just start up here and just start filling it in with the magenta. So I'm dropping it along that top edge. I'm fairly concentrated. I'm just letting it move around. You know what? I think I'm going to switch over and use my Artegria round brush just because it does give me a nicer tip when I want to go into these smaller shapes here. So let's do that instead. Make sure I got enough water on here. Just come up here. Feeling a little dry for some reason. Do you see how beautiful that's looking though? The magenta has that personality of doing that. That's specific to the quinacridone magenta. I'm just gonna guide it down a little bit. I think I want it to do a little bit of that, but I do want it to also fill in this whole shape. And I should have mentioned, I wet up to the shadow there because that is where the pink seems to end. And then it's just kind of a purple look, right? So I should have mentioned that. Right up to there is where I wet. And sometimes I don't necessarily draw my shadow lines in, but because this is such a dark, deep shadow and has very defined edges, I did that today. So something to pay attention to, as well as all these creases and folds. Again, because we're working pretty dark up here, I'm not as worried about the pencil lines. I think I'm going to be covering them quite well. So I'm going to come and drop a little bit up here and have a little case of the shapes as you come up here. Yeah, you can see I filled that in a little bit more than I wanted to with the magenta. That's okay. I'll just go with it. Kind of like that accidental little jump here. Looks like an extra ruffle. Wasn't planned, but I might let it be like that. Okay, it's coming nice. I like how the watercolor paint is just kind of flowing wherever it wants, and it's creating these beautiful shapes and helping define the edges here. So this closes up pretty tight up here. I'm going to come like so. I'm going to just also look, before I come all the way down here, looking at my reference photo to notice if there's any areas up here that I want a little more pink, or I should say magenta. Well, I have it, just it's very concentrated up here. It does kind of lighten off as it, well, you can put less of it because we're going to be getting more purple as we come down. Whoops. Kind of slopped a little up there. It's okay. Let's just change that a little. Okay, you can see sometimes I'm adding more water to this because I feel like I'm just feeling, paper's feeling dry today, which is surprising because the climate right now is pretty wet. We've had a lot of rain this year where we live, so. Okay, just come in here. Okay, I want a little case of the shakes along here because I really like the ruffles. Almost feel like I didn't quite get enough of that, so might just let myself shake a little bit more over here because that's really where you can see ruffles. And it's actually kind of smooth along this top edge, right? Because the ruffles are going to be defined in this area over here, so don't have to worry too much. A little bit of ruffling right here and then down here. Get these on here. So a little bit shaky. And I'll just fill the rest of the shape in. Again, shaky down here. I really like, though, how the paint is just kind of creating these beautiful designs, and that's the watercolor look that I'm after. So I'm gonna just let that be. Maybe we'll drop a touch of water in here just to kind of lighten things a tiny touch. Push them down a little ways. Just optional. And if you want to, we can always drop a little bit more and let the magenta do its thing just for fun. You don't have to do this. You can just leave it if you like the smoother look. But I had that nice design there, but I wanted to pull that magenta all the way down, right? So you can't see all of the characteristics of the paint as well after I pulled things. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and just maybe in a few of the creases and folds. I can tell I'm wet enough. I think I can get away with it. Just accentuate the creases and folds a little. Something like so. It's getting a bit dry here, but that's okay. Just let it be. We're going to get everything more refined in another layer, so just kind of being loose and having fun with this layer. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead, oh, look at that, a little bit bumpy there. Let it dry. So I'll let it air dry a little first, just so that I don't blow things around too bad with the hair dryer. Then I'll finish it up with the hair dryer, and then I'll be back to add a little bit more of our purples. Okay, so now that this is dry, I'm gonna come in with more purple, and I think what I'm gonna do is mix some colors so that I got a little bit more variety here from what I have. So what I'm gonna do is take some of my quinacridone magenta and just bring it over into this well where I already have some purple, but I want it to be just more of a magenta purple, and don't even need to reconstitute the whole thing, just kind of get something that's a little bit more on the purpley magenta side, just kind of in between. And then in here, just do the same thing, add a little water, and we'll pull it into being, I'll just take some of this purple here. What I'm wanting something is just more of a traditional purple. The reason I'm doing it this way is really just for the sake of looking organized here, to have it kind of go from the magenta towards the purple color. No rhyme or reason besides making it look straightforward for everybody watching. But truth is, I probably wouldn't have been quite so having it look so neat if I was painting by myself. I just go whatever well is the emptiest, that's what I'm going to play with. So no rhyme or reason for my mixing here, but now you can kind of see the transition from the magenta closer to the more purpley colors here. And I'm wondering if even this one needs a touch more magenta, just because this is a very magenta flower. I'll show you some samples on a card here. So there is the purple that's more towards the magenta side. And then here's the one that's a little more just, I don't know if you want to call that a traditional purple, but that's what I've got. And I can always come into more blue if I need it, or if I decide I need to neutralize things, we can do that after. But I feel like these two colors and the magenta just straight out of the tube will probably be good for now. And hopefully I'm concentrated enough as well. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is start on this side and work my way this direction, but I'm gonna go slower because I wanna make sure that I leave my very beautiful bright pinks light. I can always decide to add a little darkness to them later, but for the most part, I'll probably leave them alone for now. So I'm gonna come in and wet once again, see if we can use this Artegria number 8. I might go down into a smaller brush, but I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna wet this shape. I will wet those tiny little white sections that I wish I had left them just a smidgen bigger. And then I'm also going to watch that I leave this shape alone. I'm going to come in here. There's kind of a shape that's almost want to say a little bit reddish. I'm not going to worry about it for now. I'm just going to like let it get a little bit of purple on it. I'm not going to go with the really red color. You could, I'd probably use quinacridone rose for that if I wanted to go. Okay, I'm stopping here. But if, anyways, for this shape here, if you want to have a little red, I'd go with quinacridone rose, but I'm just going to let it kind of get covered in purple. So I'm going to start with my deeper purple and put a little bit up here, because it's really dark up here. And you can see those little shapes. They're kind of more of that purple, traditional purple color. I'm gonna put some extra water up here on those shapes as well. Just tap it, and then, actually, you know what, I might even just lift a little bit in a minute. I'm just gonna come in here and let's give it a little more ruffling on the edge. Kind of would like to get a little bit more of our darker magenta in here still, but that's okay. We'll just go with this for now. And then follow this line downwards, and I'll drop some more magenta into that because it does feel kind of too purple. So just come in. This is the mixture of the two together. I'll probably just lift a little bit in those spots just so I can carry on. Just drop and bring it down. Going to use this brush, and now I've got both purple paints on it, if you will. And I'll just come down. So I wet up to the edge of that, and I'm going to actually lift a little bit right along that edge because I want us to be able to see a little bit of lighter look. I'm not going to worry about all the little fuzzy sections on here, but I do want to have the kind of lighter glow that you can see in the photo. So let's just lift a little bit. So let's use our number 6 and just lift a tiny bit of that color out. It actually doesn't even matter too much because we're going to get a lot darker on this side here in a minute. I think I'm overall happy with this shape and the way it's flowing. It's kind of coming down. We have a little bit of water here, so it's keeping that edge nice and soft, but right here I didn't wet that, so that's how we have a nice hard edge there. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how much of this purple I want in this layer and how much to control it versus come back into another layer. So I put it just, you know what, I think I'm going to let it be, and then in another layer we can add a little more detail. I'm going to lift here because this is really kind of bugging me that I got it quite so dark. I'm just adding some water and just lifting it out with this brush, give it a little scrub while it's still wet. And then I'm going to come back in here after and get a little bit more refinement. I'll just go like that, and then maybe just tap because it's still kind of dark up here. Just tap it and then just use my brush and just do a little bit of this to make sure I don't get a weird edge happening. Guide the water around. Could have left those little shapes until after, but we'll just go with that for now. I think what I can actually do is come in here and put some purple here. So I'm not going to be wetting down in this area, but I'm going to keep wetting up here. This could bloom, so I got to keep an eye on this because it's touching this shape, but I think I can probably get away with it and just carry on. So watch for this shape. It's got to stay pink. But the purple kind of comes up into here. So let's just go ahead and put some purple on there so we can kind of see what's happening. So there's a little bit of purple, bring it up here a little ways. Okay, so we're going to be careful. I'll just guide that around on this side for a second, because yes, it's going to have some blooming. Use my Simply Simmons brush and just kind of do a little bit of this. You could definitely just kind of like let that shape dry before you came back in, just leaving a little gap like between them. But I was okay with trying this. Just, uh-oh, I think I kind of got a little bit onto the shape I didn't want. Oh well. Just come up into here, this purple color. I'm going to go a little bit deeper with the purple up here. Just kind of tap it along the edge of this. Like so, and then we'll bring it down. Okay, back to the water brush. And I'm not touching this edge, but I'm going to wet kind of up to the edge now. And guide that around because you can see I'm getting a hard edge. And things do get pretty dark in here. Along up to this side here. This is going to have a little purple on it after, but I'd rather not mess things up right now. So I'm just going to maybe just fill this in with water and come in with both these purples. I feel like I need a little of both of them. So go in here. You could wet more of the shape first if you want to. Work more wet on wet. I'm just going to bring that purple right down to the edge of the shadow shape. I'm going back and forth between my water and my paint, as you can see now. I have to be careful as I come closer once again to these pink shapes that I leave them alone. The reason I'm going back and forth between the paint and the water is just so that I can get variety, but you can do that by wetting the whole shape first. I could even show you that. You know what, we can just pull more water down. We could go ahead and just wet more of the shape, and you can see how we can just add the purple on top. So I gotta pay attention that I don't add the water to my pink shapes, which are mainly along the top edge, but just pay close attention to that. There's a very tiny one here. It actually works well that I have a little bit of purple in my paint because you can actually see where I'm going. Okay, so purple there. Come into here and down into here. And we'll play with the variation some more in a second. Okay, and then there's another ruffled pink edge up here, so you gotta pay attention to that. And my water brush is pretty much clear water now, so you can't really see the variation happening as much, or the purples that are on there, but you'll see in a minute. So I'm gonna put a little more purple, kind of more of the deep purple close to the edge of this shadow down here, and then I'm gonna be pulling in more of the pinky color here in a minute. And we'll keep things light over here as well. So stop around there, come like so, and then yeah, let's come in with more of this and just drop it along the edge here. And then we can lift if we want to as well. You can see I'm playing pretty runny and loose, but I'm kind of having fun with this. So I'm just letting the paint sort of do what it wants to do. This kind of comes out like so. Using the tip of this brush to refine that. And then once again, pay close attention as I come into here. It is a little bit of a purple shadow right on that folded over shape, but I'm going to let that shape be on its own for a minute. Leave it pink. We can always deepen it later. And you can see I did a little bit of a shaky edge there to give us the look of the petal having a ruffle. And then I'll just pull things down, and you can see I'm getting a drying edge here, so I'm gonna have to play with that here in a second. This is where I could have broken this into more than one shape. It's one big shape. You have to pay close attention to it, but you can break it into shapes, and then that way you don't have to be watching the water and the drying as much. Come along there. But we're gonna be okay. I'll show you how I handle it. Now either brush would work. I might use the Simply Simmons. Just come down like so. Just kind of soften that edge. It is a firmer brush, so it might end up lifting. But I don't mind if we kind of have a firmer or harder edge, rather, not firmer edge, a harder edge. It kind of gives the definition to these little creases and folds, almost like the little veins in this. That will create a little bit, you can see, it's like you can see the hard edges right there, but it looks okay because it looks like it's just a crease or fold because you see that naturally happening. So I'm going to do a little bit of lifting, not too much. I have a feeling it's more a matter of adding another layer to get some parts darker. But if we want to have a little bit of luminosity, we want to just kind of lift a little bit so we see a little bit of the light coming through still. So just do that in a few spots. I see a little bit of that here. I'm liking that. I see that happening here as well. Let's see exactly, it's kind of about here. So let's just do a little bit of, you can see I wash and dry my brush and then I lift. Wash and dry and lift, and I feel like I probably could get a little bit more of that purple. Let's just tap a little more of the medium color right in there because I feel like I've lifted more than I need to. And again, you're noticing I'm trying to pay attention to the creases and the folds in this. I'm just gonna come down here a little bit. This is definitely gonna get darker after, so won't worry about that being not as dark as I want it quite yet. I do like having a little bit of that luminosity right here because I do see a little bit of light. So that in there. And the next layer we will break things a little bit more into shapes so that it's one, easier to control, and we can also get the details. So just lift a tiny bit here. You can see it's starting to dry, but we're going to be okay. We'll just make sure we have everything wet to the edges so we don't get weird blooms as it dries. That's really the secret. If you feel like things are kind of like you're taking a little bit longer than you would have liked and you feel like things are starting to dry funny, just add a little more water on top of everything. That is kind of like in that in-between stage of dry, so it all gets at kind of the same stage of wet, if that makes sense. And you shouldn't get a bloom. And if you do, you can always just kind of refine it because of the way these creases and the folds and everything are moving. You can probably just do a little bit of lifting like you saw I did here, and that funny edge doesn't seem bad to me. So I'm gonna let that be. And I think everything is wet enough. I have to dry it before I can add anything else. We could add a layer of green here if we want to, just because we have to let things dry anyways. Let's do that really quickly. Just a light layer. We'll come back in and you can see there's like purple veins in these leaves, so that's pretty. This green here is primarily made with Hansa Yellow Deep and Phthalo Blue. Usually I add a touch of quinacridone rose to my greens, and I think this is actually perfect the way it is. If I want a little more yellow, just put a little more yellow in there. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and just wet these. I'll use another number 6 just to get some water on them quickly. Could use one of the Artegria as well, but these are smaller shapes. So let's just quickly add a little water. I'm going to paint it as one big green shape for now, and we'll break it apart later. I'm seeing mostly the green kind of along this top edge, so just be careful because I could easily dip into that. Let's just tip the paper. Let's put this nice bright green, especially the top edges. It could even have a bit of a darker green. That's okay. We'll just start with this for now. Just fill that in and let it lighten off as it comes towards the base of this flower. So just doing the sepal leaves for now, the tips of them, and then we'll figure out how much green to allow to come downwards, because you can see things get a little bit of a light, almost like a white color, and then it kind of goes purple, and then there's green again. So let's put some green here. I'm just going to end it just like kind of like that. You know what, I think I can pretty much, I'll just leave a little bit of lightness there because I don't want to have the purple get too dull. It can get a bit dull, so I'll just leave a little bit of lightness in this kind of center area here, and we're going to call that good for the greens. So now, yes, everything's got to dry before we add anything else to it. So I'll let it air dry once again for a few seconds, and then I'll come in with the hair dryer. Okay, so after I dried this, I went ahead, and if you look closely, you'll see I went ahead and penciled some of these lines back on just to give me some guidance, because everything's going to get darker, and so you can get away with some pencil lines there. And what I'm going to do is, again, repeat what I did, but coming in a little drier, a little more controlled still, so we get more details. So I've got all my brushes here. I'm wondering about even going wet on dry to start with, but let's see. Come in first with this color. I'm going to come a little bit more carefully, just in this shape, and bring it downwards, and then let's bring it across here. So right now, I'm just coming directly onto the dry paper. And then also, I'm going to pay attention to maybe leaving this one spot where you can kind of see more of that red shape. I'll come in after and just refine things a bit. So I'm kind of working around it just to set it apart a little bit. And then come along the top here, and I'm going to start adding some water here in a minute. So I'm just starting with just getting that nice rich color on here and coming downwards. And then I'm going to soften the edges with some water. Let's try the Artegria. Artegria doesn't give it's easy water control, but I think I'm gonna like the flow from it. So just coming up to this hard edge here where we have a nice defined edge, and dropping a little bit more of that. I'm not following the exact creases and folds per se from the reference. I'm just kind of estimating. Now I've got my water brush with a little bit of the paint that's on it from working. Just come up to here, soften that. I'm going to lift a little bit. Again, we want it lighter along that edge for now. Well, it'll be lighter in the end. I just don't know if we can get a bit darker. But okay, drop a little more of that purpley color along here. Put some along here. It gets lighter as it comes down here, so I don't want to overdo it. Pull this a little bit. Just kind of playing with the paint a bit. Probably can put a tiny bit of the darker purple up here. I'm working a little drier, so the blooms are going to be more prone to showing up as things are drying, so I got to be careful. Just because I've kind of got, I guess you could say, some areas down here that are more wet. That's why. It's not because this is so dry, it's because it's wetter below. I think I'm liking that though. I like how that's dropping on there. I think I'm gonna use the Simply Simmons brush just to kind of guide it a little bit, because again, I can lift a touch with it and it's a bit drier. Let me bring my paper towel in so you can see. I often tap kind of outside the camera and you can't always see that. So it's gonna allow me to get some of these creases and folds in here. Helps with water control as well, because it's a slightly, behaves like a thirstier brush. I'll put it that way. I think I'm happy with that. Okay, let's move down. Maybe we can work in here a little bit while that dries, because I want things to have a nice hard edge there. So I'm thinking we're just going to go with a bit of a light purple. You could work kind of a little more wet on dry if you want the texture that you can see in this section. You can see it's kind of like some areas are very, very stark, textured white and purple. I think I'm just going to let it be a little more smooth. So I'm not going to aim for quite the texture that we see here. You have to work really kind of like almost like dry brush effect, but I don't think I want that. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm using my Simply Simmons brush and I'm going to try and do these lines and let them flow around a little bit so that I have softer edges. Okay, let's come up. We'll put a little bit of water up here just so we have a, I don't want to touch that edge right there. I'll just soften this a little bit. It's going to get darker in here, so you're not going to see that hard edge there. I'll just stop right there. And I'm going to soften things a little bit more. Figure out where I want to drop a little bit more of this. Come in here a little bit. So it's kind of, you can see I'm kind of coming back over it as it's drying. It's, I think I could probably even get a little bit more purple on here. So I'll just top this off. I'm just going to go over everything pretty much with a purple. I'm almost dry brush. I'm working quite dry. You can probably hear the scratching of my brush on the paper. I'm working fairly dry, but not perfectly dry. This is a little wet on wet. As you can see, everything's kind of a little bit blurry looking, so there's still water present. But if you like the pure white there, just don't add that light purple everywhere. I might lift a little bit, because when I filled that in, I was like, you know what? I feel like it lost some of the luminosity, so I'm gonna just keep it a little bit, a little more light. because I don't want the real dry brush effect, I don't think, but just go like that. And then I'll just add some more on top. Maybe we will end up a little more dry than I was planning. So squeeze the ferrule a bit, and my brush is now kind of like chisel shaped. This is still a round brush, but it looks more chiseled, and I'm working quite dry. This is still damp, but my brush is quite dry. It's giving me this control, and it's kind of giving me a little bit of a wet on damp effect. So it's not really wet on dry. And I'm going to come in here and just kind of take artistic license. Maybe we will get more texture than I was necessarily intending. I think I could even put a little more of the pinky purple in here because it's looking pretty deep. So put a little bit of this on here. Once again, squeeze my brush out so that it's not too wet. I'm just coming over the lines with just a little bit of that color, just to bring a little of that purple in. If you like it more the royal purple, you can definitely leave it the way it was. And this is going to get a lot darker here. I just don't want to do that right now because this was kind of damp. And then I can also deepen things down here. So just bring it up to here. I think this whole section here, we can get away with a little bit of, get rid of that chisel tip now. Just fill this in up to here. And even, you know what, I'm just going to add a little water and just soften that a little bit, that edge, because I don't like what's happening there. Maybe we'll add a touch more of the two purples together right here and go a little darker. You can kind of see that shape right in here. A little darker here. Now I'm working pretty tentatively just because I'm trying to figure out how much purple I want versus how much white, because I feel like the lightness in this area really adds the luminosity to the flower, but there's definitely purple there. And so I'm just looking at the reference photo, looking at my painting, trying to figure out how much purple I actually want here, as well as like how soft or hard I want the edges. Soften the edge of this a little bit. Again, if you don't want soft edges, you can just leave them a little bit hard edged. I'm kind of trying to make decisions, artistic decisions here in terms of how much I want to soften things or have hard edges, because it is hard edges in the photo, but I don't think I like them like that. So that's why I'm kind of trying to think about this as I go. I think it's dry enough. I can probably come into this section now as well. Could have left a little bit of a lighter area. I'll lift a little bit out of there after. Let's bring this up. And yes, I'm pretty dry up there, but we'll be able to blend and play with that, I think, after. So I'm just going to lift a little bit there because I do want to have, you can see a bit of light there. I don't want it as bright as the photo, but I'm going to lift a little bit just so we have a little bit of something right in here. So wet and dry my brush and just go like this. All right, I'm going to pull that back. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I'm gonna let that dry for now a little bit before I come and do this section that's touching it. But I could probably work in these tiny shapes and get them a little more completed. So let's do that. And we'll just pretty much use the magenta and some water and maybe a tiny touch of the purple color. So let's come in here. I think I'm dry enough that I can just kind of play a little bit. So I'll put a little water on my brush. So I've got quinacridone magenta. And then I'm going to use another Simply Simmons number 6. So I'm working with both. These are both number 6 Simply Simmons. I'm going to wet this shape. You could use whatever brush. I'm just doing my two brush things. So then I'm going to drop some of that magenta in. It's a little darker along here. Add a little more concentrated. Tap it along here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of create some of these. Ooh, I'm almost too dry. Get some of these creases and folds. We can soften the edges here with my water brush. That's why I like having the two brushes on the go. And maybe we'll put a tiny touch of this purpley color as well. And bring that up just along that edge a little bit. Just like so. Let it kind of flow up into this petal. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. And then it's kind of just goes shadowy down here. So it's my water brush I'm softening with. And then let's go over here and do the same thing. So add some water. We want to be fairly dry because I want to have this shape kind of almost like it's almost hard edge, but not. We're going to have it just as like more like wet on damp painting here. So oh, that's a little too wet right now. Let's get a little more concentrated pigment. So that color that was on there was kind of that purpley color, right? Now it's a mixture of the purple and the quinacridone magenta. Kind of clean that edge up a little bit as I do this. You can see that's getting a nice darker area, and you can see that look in the reference photo, right? Gives it the look like it's folded over. So that's how that's going to be defined. Again, a little more water. I feel like I'm just kind of at a weird amount of wet versus dry here. I want enough water to have a flowy look, but I almost feel like I'm a little touch on the dry side. Okay, now you can't really see the creases and folds, but I'm taking artistic license. I just did that wet on dry. You could do it wet on damp. Well, technically I had water on there, but it's acting wet on dry. There we go. Just blend it out a little bit. Just want a little bit of texture here. A little bit of creases, folds that are kind of folding over. You know what? It does get a little bit more purple on this side, so let's put a little bit of that right here. It's almost blended that out a little too much. As it dries, we can always come in and just tap a bit more on there. This shape I don't mind, but I'll just put a little purple there. And that's wet on dry. Then just soften that edge a little. Just going to use kind of a damp brush and just kind of lift a touch. Kind of between those darker areas, so it'll help give the impression of creases and folds in here. And then I'm going to come in here and just do this shape here. I'm not going to paint this one. I'm coming behind it. I'm going to put a little bit more color into this area. I really like the way the edges are on here. I think it's really pretty. Kind of just the way the paint flowed because I had enough paint on there. And I'm going to drop a little bit of the mixture again, some quinacridone magenta and some of the purple. This purple here, it's kind of a mixture on my brush. Just get a little darker, and that makes it kind of look like it's behind this. And then I'll just put a little along this edge. Again, take a little artistic license. I'm going to create a few creases and folds here. I know there's some white kind of creases. I'm not going to worry too much about those. And kind of paint around them. You know what? I might even just, because I can see my pencil lines pretty bold there, you know what I might do? I might just kind of, instead of letting them be white, put a little bit of the dark on there for this time, because then I cover up the pencil a bit. If you don't have that issue, you could definitely, well, you know what? I was going to say, you could definitely kind of do negative shape painting too. Now this, I could have painted that section there. It could have been pink before too. We'll just put a little bit of this color on right now. Later it's going to get purple, but let's just do that. Get one layer on there, and then we'll come back on there after. So yeah, we're gonna do the creases and folds with what's on our brush. I like that. So it's a little bit darker maybe than the reference photo, but I think it's okay. And then this area here has a shadow, and I'm gonna make it darker than this, but I'm not actually gonna go as dark as it is in the photo because it's, I think it's kind of pretty to show there's this whole petal is there. So a little artistic license and make that petal just like it's folded over and it's on top of the one, you know, the area below. Yeah, I think I'm liking this. I want to go like dark enough that the shadow is there, but I want to make sure that I don't blend it into the petal. Well, it's all one petal, but the part that's on the other side of the fold. Yeah, I'm liking that. So we could probably do this little section here. Yeah, I think we're dry enough. We could do that. So let's go ahead and do it and just have, it doesn't have a whole lot for details. I'm just going to wet it. We're going to do some wet on wet details here because they are kind of blurry looking in the photo. So I'm just going to go right up to there and just do a few really quickly. I don't want to waste a lot of time on this section because it's not really, to me, focal point. It's blurred out, and as long as it's just showing a little bit of texture, that's good enough. Go a little bit darker down here. Could use slightly more water. Whoops, slopping a little touch, but a little bit wetter. with my pigment and my water here. So it's going to bleed around a little bit more. I'm just kind of tapping, hopefully to get a little bit more variety there. And then again, pull it, wet on dry. So or I should say wet on damp. That's how I'm maintaining these details. And they're almost more detailed than they need to be because, as I said, this section of the flower to me doesn't need as much detail. Just going to lift a little touch with my damp brush. And just a tiny, tiny little bit of the purpley color, just a little bit in here, like so. Again, I'm tapping along the edges so that I can kind of maintain the ruffled look. I'm going to work wet on dry, and I'm going to just, or not wet on dry, sorry, wet on damp. I'm using the Simply Simmons brush just to put a little water on here. You can see it's actually a little bit pigmented. Just want it to be clear, but just putting a little bit of water. Simply Simmons brush, as I've said before, holds less, it'll put less on, so you'll be able to have an easier time with your wet on damp details. So we're going to do that, then we're going to squeeze this out, and I feel like we can probably mainly work with this purple. You know what, let's take a little bit over here. I just feel like I keep going into both purples, so why not just mix them? Obviously I could have put a touch more of the quinacridone magenta into here. It's just a little too blue at times. And then what I'm going to do, so this has had just this little second to dry a bit, so it's still damp, but you can see I'm getting these details. I'm again using the chisel tip kind of effect. Probably even put a little more of the purple on here. It's looking a little more pink than it has to. It's okay. It's drying too much. So a little more water. Obviously gave it a little too much time without touching it, or it was just, I didn't wet it much. So I'm using a soft, damp brush. Just, sorry. When I say soft, this is the Simply Simmons brush, but I'm just using a damp brush to kind of soften that. And I will come back in and let's bring a little more of the purple in here. I am seeing more of that. And then let's try this again. Again, I'm trying to give myself that chisel tip. See how this goes. It's working okay. Actually comes down more like so. And then this one, ooh, getting a little more water than I want. A little bit of line here. I'm gonna have to soften that. I see a little bit of a line here. You can choose to leave them hard edge too. I'm just kind of being more particular. I like the soft edge look there, but you could definitely leave some hard edges. And try and clean that line up a little bit. You can see it kind of bled a little too much. So again, using the damp clear water brush just to clean that up, and then bring it all of these together, kind of come into this section, and it gets purple. So just let them join. I'm not going to worry about all the little white fuzzy appearance that you can see there. You could always probably add that on if you wanted to with a little bit of like white pencil or gouache, but I'm not going to worry about that. Just adding a little water again, just to soften that. And then I think I'll just come down here. I might even put a little more of this one. So I come down here and tap a little bit. Trying to figure out how much I want here. Okay, just washing that brush. I'm just gonna come soften the edge. I don't mind if you can see a little bit of the green, kind of green hue under there, but it does look pretty purple, doesn't it, if you look at the photo? Let's tap a little bit more. Put it in the center. I think I like that. And if you want to, you can always put a little bit more of the purple color as well. It's a little bit wet, a little bit damp still into this area. I'm not sure if I want to do it right now, because if I do, I'll probably mess up the lines that I did. Yeah, let's leave it. We can always add a tiny, tiny touch of either more purple or even maybe a little bit more green or mixture just in this area, because I feel like those leaves look a little bit flat right now. They need a little bit of something, but I don't want to mess up what I'm liking. So I'm just going to let it dry so that what's there gets to be a little more permanent, and then we can play with things a little bit more in the leaves afterwards. So I will be right back once I've dried it. Okay, so now that it's dry, we're gonna do the last details in here. And I might wet it with the Artegria brush just because it doesn't lift the pigments as much, although it does apply more water. So we'll see how it goes. We might have to use Simply Simmons to kind of help control our water in a minute here. Do you think we can do this whole section? If you feel like maybe not, you can always cut it off at one point, like say here. This would be an okay cutoff point for now, and then we can always kind of play with it after. I'll probably pull my shadow shapes downwards a little bit, down this stem a bit. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to leave that tiny little part that's kind of more red in the photo. I'm going to just leave it the color it is, and it will look like it's separate from the section here, and it's not going to be as red because I don't see the point that we need to go quite as red there. So I'm going to come in here. Let's use this mixture here because it's, like I say, it's already got a little bit of both of our purples. Might even go with a tiny touch more of this. You can just play with things as you go. I'm going to put a lot of it along this edge here. Almost. I like how that's kind of bleeding around. It's pretty. I'm going to put more of it under this shape too. I might guide that around. That's definitely got the quinacridone magenta flow to it, right? Okay, kind of gets darker down here. Bring it together up there. Okay. And then I'll have a damp brush here that I can kind of guide that around a little bit so I'm not constantly washing my brush. And then I'll just come up here and start pulling things around a little bit. I feel like I see a little bit of a vein there. I don't want to lose the areas where I've maintained or got a little bit more luminosity. I'll drop a little purple there, and then you can see a vein or a crease, fold, whatever they are. Just come with the purple. Dropping a little more up here, let it get a little darker. I don't think I want to go darker right here. Let's just, oh, just a second. Got quite a bit of pigment on both brushes right now. Okay, do this. I kind of like that lighter area right here, so I'm going to maybe lift a little bit because I think it's pretty. And then I'll just kind of keep going around and doing this. So where I see a nice vein, crease, fold, we'll put it on there. And they kind of like come from down here and work their way up, right? You can probably already see that, but some of them you can just see and you can add them. Some of them you just want to make it look like it's kind of just following the crease or the fold vein that was already in the flower. Better not to lift your brush in the middle of that stroke. Kind of start looking at what I was doing in the photo, but let's see. And I know I've got that dry area right, so I'm gonna have to work with that. Okay, so water now, just soften that because you can see we're getting a weird edge there. Just soften it. Just a little bit of a damp brush. Soften and soften, and I feel like I'm ready to move in to this. Actually, no, not quite. Before I move down, I want to drop a little more of that purple right along here because I feel like the shadow is the darkest down here, right? So let's do that. You can even come up to here and do this crease, and then we'll have to soften that one edge. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. It's a water brush to kind of just soften. This is kind of more the most detailed part, but I'm really enjoying it. Just take your time. Okay, now we're going to add some more water. So I'm going to come in here and just soften that edge. And then come here, I might use a little bit of the Artegria around just because it's a little more gentle. You can use whatever brush though. I don't know why I'm using this one because honestly, I used just the Simply Simmons for years without any troubles, so you don't have to be switching the brush types like that. I actually had a Simply Simmons 10. That was the first one I started with. and it went a long way. It really did. Okay, come down here. Whoops. Yeah, went over the edge. It's okay. We'll decide what to do about it after, if we need to clean it up or if we can make it work. Okay, just a little darker all along here once again, and we do have it kind of come to a nice hard edge here, the way that the veins are, so I think we're going to be okay to just go nice and dark. You can absolutely turn your page. That would probably make this a lot easier than trying to work it all upright the way I'm doing it right now. Turn it upside down, you'll have an easier time probably. Okay, let's see. Yeah, need to kind of come right along here with this. You can see I put a little more of that magenta purple. And I'll come in here, not being precise in here, but drop a little bit more of that on there, and then, you know what, I'm gonna wash my brush. So I'm just a little bit more on the magenta side versus the purples in here. I feel like I'm seeing more of that magenta for a little bit. So we'll drop that in there, and wow, I'm not very wet there. You can see that's just kind of staying the way it is. Okay, I'm gonna just use the water brush, Simply Simmons. Just pull that down. And drop a little bit of water. Again, that water brings a little bit of luminosity back, and that I really was liking some of that I had over here. It's that luminous, beautiful look of the light of the paper. Oops, I want to cut off here because this shape I'm going to go a little darker with after. So I'll just let it be. It does get pretty dark. It actually kind of flows. I don't know, maybe I can do it all at once. We'll see what we can do here. Let's just get this part to the point we like it. And then I'll come up and visit this little shape up here. We'll see if we can do that all at once. I'm just gonna just pay attention. I think I'm almost too wet here to come in with my purples. It's almost like too shiny, and I do want to get some of those lines, so I will come up here. And you can see there's this one line that kind of comes like this. Oh, it's actually holding its own. I'm surprised. I thought I was too wet. And then it comes into here, and it gets pretty dark. We'll add a little water so it doesn't just look like a solid shape. Just tap in a little bit right there. I'm actually surprised how well that worked. Yeah, I'm surprised. I guess I don't have too much water on my Simply Simmons brush right now, because I mean that paper is shiny. It should be kind of almost flowing a little bit more, but maybe because the brush isn't too wet. I'm surprised. I'm maintaining a little bit of that texture there, a little bit of the creases and folds. It's disappearing as it sits. We'll come back in and do a little lifting. So back to the water brush. Just lift a tiny bit. Not bad. It really hasn't bled too badly. Overall, I'm really happy with that. There is another line here, which I'm gonna try and put that on there. Let the little bloom or star happen down here where it's all shadowy anyways. But I'm really happy with that overall. So while that's drying, we could come in and just do a little something, just a touch of color on top of those little leaves. So nothing too much. I'm gonna put water on top, and then I'll just drop a tiny little tiny bit of our purple, just because you can see it in the photo, and I think it does add to these. So I don't know, I might have too much on my brush. Let's check this out. Just tap a little bit and see. It's probably actually just almost fine. I'll just guide it around with a little bit of water, and I think that's probably going to be good. It's just harmonizing it. It's kind of pulled it into a little bit more of a neutral green, and it's harmonizing nicely with our flower. If you want it more vibrant, you don't have to add that, but I felt like it did help make it a little bit more the color that was there in the photo, and I did like that color. Okay, add anything else to the stem, get a little bit darker. We're so close to done. Just tap a little bit of water there. And then this shape here is dry enough that we can just do a tiny little bit of wet on dry, just to do this tiny little crease and fold right in here. You can see it's darker than the rest of this petal. Maybe the other thing I can do is just add a tiny, tiny bit of water up here, and then again, a little bit of detail, creases, folds, whatever, just to kind of add some life to this. And again, you can see there's some lighter areas in this shape. I'm just gonna go ahead and do a little bit of creases and folds with a combination of the magenta and that purpley color that we made. Okay, so I went ahead and dried it because I want to do just one last little bit here to define this little crease the way it comes down. I might even mainly just use this color, the magenta, maybe a tiny touch of this. I want to lean more to the magenta side, but it is darker, so maybe a blend here. And then I'm going to go ahead and wet right up to here, so kind of where that's kind of got a line anyways, and just up to here. I was thinking I might just draw this line on here and then wet the shape around it, but then I was like, oh, you know what, it's easy enough to just go ahead and wet that shape, but either way it'd work. And just come into here, so we have a nice hard line there. I'll just use my water and just soften things, bring a little more of that pinky color right up to there. Make sure we don't have a weird edge anywhere. I think I'm happy with that. And then obviously just put a little bit of water in. I'm not going to worry about that little funny shape there. I know kind of went out of the line a little bit, but I'm just going to let it be. Okay, so just tweak that. And then I think I could do that in one other spot here. So I'll just wet up to here, but I'm not going to come, I do not want to touch where I just went. So I'm going to come about to here. And this is kind of optional. I'm just going to drop a tiny bit more of the magenta color in a few spots. This is, like I say, nice, not necessary. I hope I'll be okay with that. And then I'll just use my water brush and just guide it downwards a little bit. Hope I'm okay with this last little bit that I did. And I'll just bring a little bit more water up here. I feel like I've got a little bit of a hard edge developing here, so let's just top it with a little water, make sure there's no hard edges. And same thing here, just make sure I don't feel like there's anything hard edged or wonky. I know my edges aren't perfect, but they're okay. Okay. And I'll just tap a little touch there too. This is not essential. This is a little bit extra. Just use what's on my brush and just do a little line there. Let's tap a tiny bit more color down here too. But otherwise, I think I'm pretty happy with this. This was a really fun project. These ruffles and folds and creases were just so much fun to paint. Thank you so much for joining me today as we painted and appreciated the beauty of God's creation. I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of His beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!